everyone. Welcome to our kind of sneak preview and first actual class on transits and Dashas for business and investment and mundane predictions. Many of you know me from my blog or from other classes that you've taken with me. I've been teaching Vedic astrology online since 2016. I used to teach live classes going back to 1999. I've been involved in Vedic astrology since 1987. I specialize in financial astrology, but been doing it for so long. I've kind of gotten more interested in spiritual astrology and psychological astrology and such. I learned astrology through transits. I mean, I had many teachers also, but one of the things that I advocate in my classes, especially in the transit class, is that you watch the transits every day and you see how you feel, you see what happens in the world, you see what happens in the markets, you look at the planetary aspects, and that's really an important part of seeing how you feel, seeing how the world feels, see how people that you know that are close to you, how they react, and it really is a nice way to kind of see what happens in the world. I tend to lecture more on these presentations. At some point, I will take pauses for questions. If you don't know, go to webinar. Sometimes it's tricky to unmute yourselves, and you might have to type a question in the chat box. In the live class, if you're on the class link, then you have full access to the mic, and it's real easy to use. And some of you are set up that way, and some of you aren't. In general, I start classes on time. I will often send the PowerPoints ahead of time. With these Thursday classes, I often end up finishing the last minute, but I often will send a tape ahead of time. If you want me to use your chart in class to talk about different transits or different principles, you can send me your chart data too if you sign up for the class. And all classes are recorded, and so if you miss the class, they're sent out. Go to webinar sends them out actually 2 hours later. I send them out 24 hours later in case go to webinar goes into spam. So it's pretty basic. Here's my kind of contact information. You can reach me at support@fortucast.com. I am on Facebook. I do see text on Facebook, but not maybe every 2 or 3 days. So it's not the. I see my emails every 15 minutes, so you can always catch me by email. I have probably 50 or 60 tapes on my YouTube channel, Financial Astrology by Barry Rosen. So most of them are introductions to the 40 classes or so that I've taught. And I've also authored 5 books, including a couple on transits. And chances are I will give you those if you sign up for the course. This is my latest book, Finding Your Blind Spots Using Vedic Astrology. And it kind of is more current with my psychological and spiritual interests. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this particular class. We will have an actual class today. I don't always just give previews. I will give a preview of what the class is, but the first class actually has information that's really important, and so there will be a really first class here today. If you sign up for the class, the next live class will be Thursday, January 22nd, and then every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time. They are always recorded if you miss them, and I realize this is a work day for a lot of people. A lot of people are retired. Some people are in foreign countries, so it works. If you sign up for this class, you get the practicum classes, which are the Financial Astrology Magazine classes that I do the second Thursday of the month. This week, I'm doing it the third Thursday of the month, and next week's class is the year ahead, 2026, where I'll look at, what all the exciting things we have coming next year. And This is probably one of the more or kind of earth-shattering years that we're going to have in a long time. You can see how it's going to start it out with a bang, with the U.S. capturing a Soviet or a Russian oil tanker and capturing Maduro and riots in Minneapolis. You know, it's definitely kind of, you can see that it's not just an ordinary year. So we have a lot to say next week. It doesn't, you know, we're always safe and protected, but it's nice to kind of get an idea what's going on. So that's special next week. You can sign for that separately. It's $39 if you just want to be there next Thursday, and it's $99 if you want to join the monthly and you don't do the class. So what is this class about? So I'm kind of combining a number of things in this class. It's a very rich class. I've taught transit classes 2 or 3 times. And for people who are new to transits is my specialty. I've been, you know, really kind of an expert in them, and I look at them much more deeply than most people do. So we always study transits for kind of personal knowledge, and that will be a part of the course, because we all want to know what's going to happen when Mars is conjunct Rahu, and you know, in February and March, and you know, and how that impacts our chart and things like that. So those things are always important. I set up this particular track because I've been teaching financial astrology again, and to understand market behavior, you really kind of need to understand the transits and how they impact the market. So there's going to be some of that information also. And then there's also kind of the business astrology aspect of it, which is, you know, there are kind of larger business cycles connected to some of the outer planets and looking at mundane astrology. So this year in February 20th, we have Saturn conjunct Neptune, which only happens every 35 or 36 years. Last time we had it, that cycle tends to reorganize the geopolitical landscape. Last time it happened, the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union kind of dissolved, and we had all those new independent former Soviet Union states being created, including Ukraine. And so it's kind of useful for longer term business cycles to kind of understand some of how the outer planets kind of shape larger business cycles. And you know, as we move into the end of the decade, a lot of things are, you know, just kind of percolating with, you know, just huge changes coming. So I have specialized in mundane astrology for many years, and I actually I kind of gave it up in around 2017 because it doesn't really make anybody happy, because you know, so you have to also find a way to kind of talk about things that are happening without having a supercharge about it or getting into a huge political argument. I mean, there are just larger economic and political cycles that have gone on time immemorial, and they govern changes of civilization and changes of all kinds of changes. So certainly part of the course is kind of learning some of that material, and it also helps us kind of get a handle on all the changes that are coming over the next 10 years. When we look at markets, you know, we know Jupiter and Venus kind of expand, Saturn and K2 contract, and then all the interactions of the other planets. There's kind of 1,000 shades of gray to understand. And one of the things, you know, that you do if you look at everything every day, you start kind of understanding how markets behave, how people behave, how political things happen. And even looking at the Panchanga, the lunar day and the half lunar day, the Karana and the Nitya Yoga, the relationship between the sun and the moon, and all those things. There's a lot of information there, all these kind of special nakshatra yogas that have a huge influence on the day. And all of those are useful for planning your personal week or your personal day. So sometimes, like, you have an important job interview and Sometimes they just tell you that you have to come. Sometimes they have a choice. Well, I have an opening Tuesday or Wednesday. What day is better for you? And you look at your calendar and you see, there's a lot of gray, dark energy for you on Wednesday, and you say, well, let's do Tuesday. I think it's a better day for me. It's kind of useful to understand that. And even days of the week, most of you know this, but I don't know. Most people have trouble with Mondays because most people have weak moons. And yes, you have an exalted moon and it's a really good planet for you, or moon in Cancer and it's unafflicted. For the most part, Mondays are pretty dreadful for most people. On the other hand, when we do Muhurta, Thursdays and Fridays, which are ruled by Venus and Jupiter, are generally good days. And so that's why we're having class on Jupiter. It's also, connected to knowledge. So that's kind of nice. So the outer planets, we have to spend some time on. For the long, when I first got into Vedic astrology, I was a pure Vedic astrologer, and my Western astrologer friends would talk about Uranus and Neptune and things, and I would say, oh, that's nonsense. And lo and behold, it was super important. And some of the ancient sages even talked about the outer planets, and they, if you've read my articles on the outer planets, Varuna and things like that, there are kind of Yama connected to Pluto and things like that. There's kind of the sages kind of foresaw that the outer planets would be discovered, and they are very important. They're crucial for large economic cycles. You can't ignore the outer planets. They're everything when you're trying to predict large economic cycles and things like that. And so that's why this year the big events are Saturn conjunct Neptune. It's a long conjunction. It goes into next year. Lots of changes happening with it. You can see all the geocosmic changes in the world. India is kind of aligning more with Russia and China, and the U.S. is trying to pull it away. We've had Iran kind of fall from grace. There's just huge things happening, and there's a lot more to come. I mean, it's just part of these larger geopolitical cycles. We also need to understand business cycles. You get cycles of expansion and contraction, and so actually, that's not the point I wanted to make. It's important. We've got Ketu going into Cancer next year in November, and what is that going to do to the real estate market? Well, think about Cancer is the sign of homes, and real estate's been kind of on this upswing, and if there's kind of an 18-year cycle with real estate, and go back 18 years and what happened to real estate. So you can kind of see that we're probably completing the real estate completing the real estate surge cycle, and K2 will go into Cancer, the sign connected to home, and K2 has a way of deflating things or taking things away, and we have a lot of economic crises coming anyway. Just when you have $35 trillion of debt, what are you going to do? The world is swimming in debt. You've heard me on my monthly magazine. So in general, for your personal life, again, I always we all care about our personal life and the transits to our personal life. That may be a reason for taking the course. One of the things that I'm going to do is I am going to teach a lot of advanced and new material in this class, but I will give you videotapes to watch from my other transit course, which is a little bit more based on personal transits and the effect on your life. So when you sign up for the course, I'll probably send you 4 or 5 tapes on retrogrades and combustion and planetary aspects and things like that for you to watch to get familiar. So and there'll be a number of bonus tapes. I will be doing live classes 4 times a month, and it's great to have a live class because you can ask questions. I will give you lots of videotapes to watch also, and that's, there's a bonus in that, because sometimes in anything in Vedic astrology, you kind of have to listen to things twice to, to kind of have it sink in. But I'm personally interested in helping you understand the major connections to your natal chart and the conjunctions and all the nakshatra chances and all those things. So it's a very huge topic. And I have a kind of a variety of students in my classes. I have students who are rather advanced and people that are studying with me for 8 or 9 or 10 years. And I have students that are, fairly new. And I want to take care of all of you. So I do have a bunch of new material planned for this transit course that I haven't taught tomorrow. There will be material on Parivartana yogas. I have expanded new material on planetary aspects, expanded material on outer planetary things, expanded material on conjunctions, and also I have some new material on retrograde planets by sign house and natal chart. So for those of you who have studied with me before, I do have a bunch of new things that I'll be adding to the class. And at the same time, if you haven't studied with me, you'll get the stuff that I've presented before, and then you'll get the more advanced material. So, it's kind of the best of both worlds. And like anything, it's a matter of how deep you want to go into anything. Some people can just show up every Thursday and ask questions, and you're welcome to do that. Some people, have time and they can study the material more deeply. It's up to you. The big thing is that every week we're going to look at the transits and subtle energies and the impact on the markets of the world, and we'll do that today too, to give you a taste of that. I always, and for those of you who read my transit columns, I just think about this stuff very deeply and try to make it, very appropriate to, your lives. I did promise some Dasha material. Dashas is really kind of a separate course, and what I'll probably do is give you, what I wanted to do for the Dasha section was introduce Chara Dasha. Chara Dasha is a sign-based Dasha, so you go into maybe a 10-year Aries period and a 12-year Taurus period, and either goes clockwise or counterclockwise, and we'll learn about that. But those work really well for individuals, and they work really well for countries. So when you're trying to predict a country and you see that it's about to go into, it's been in this great period, and then suddenly it's going into a 12th house, sign, and you can just tell that things are going to shake up a little bit. So I have about 6 videos on Chara Dasha, which I will give you to study on your own, and then we'll do some case studies for a couple weeks to use them. So part of the problem with all this material is there's a lot of depth to Vedic astrology, and one way I can try to fit everything in that I promised is I can give you a bunch of videotapes to study, and then I can go over and you can ask questions, and then we can do some new and advanced material every week. So that's kind of what we're doing. The cost of this course is $395. I believe the early bird runs through next Wednesday, and after next Wednesday, I believe it's $495. And again, when you sign up, you'll get the year ahead, which is going to be next Thursday, and then you'll get the weekly video magazine for a quarter, for 4 months, connected to as long as we're in the class. So anyway, that's when you get a replay of the videotape, there'll be a tab for signing up, and you can also go under appliedvedicastrology.com, my website, and click on the financial astrology tab. And if you have trouble, just email me. One of the things that I came up with a temporary syllabus. One of the things that I find is courses kind of are dynamic and creative, and you think you can cover something in X number of weeks, and then you need an extra week, or sometimes you think you need 2 weeks, and then you really can cover it in 1 week. So I have a general outline for you, and I'll go over that real quickly, but it is dynamic. Again, when you sign up for the course, I'll send you 4 or 5 pre-recorded tapes on retrograde planets, exalted and debilitated planets, combustion, and aspects. Those are really kind of core things to understand about transits. I've taught them in depth. They're also in my book. I will also give you, I have some almanacs that I did in 2018 and 2019, and they have long articles on transits on them. And so I will send them to you. They're good reference guides, and you can look up just about anything. And I really explain transits in great detail in those almanacs. So when we have our next live class in 2 weeks, for new, some of this stuff I have covered it last quarter, but I will go over it again because we have some new people to look at planets, nakshatras, and signs for economic patterns. So again, we know Jupiter is Venus is comfort, and Jupiter is knowledge and all these things, but when you're looking sometimes at mundane and economic things, you have to kind of see some additional indicators, including nakshatras. I mean, there's certain nakshatras that are connected to certain commodities and things like that. So I will go over that again, and chances are I may just send you the videotape to watch, so you'll just be ready. Again, there are different levels of experience in the class. But we'll go through, different things in detail. We'll go through moon cycles, eclipses, which we'll go through the Panchanga, which I use a lot. We'll look at the basic transits of all the major planets over 4 or 5 weeks. We'll look at the outer planets for a couple of weeks. And I got some new advanced material for my older students. We'll look at retrograde planets in people's charts by sign, by planet, by house. We'll look at advanced aspects. Sometimes people tell you you've got an aspect of Jupiter, an aspect of Venus, or you've got an aspect of Saturn, and Vedic astrology is like reading strands of DNA. What kind of an aspect is it? So there's, what kind of an influence does it have? Everything has a specific meaning, and I like to get very specific. It's like reading strands of DNA. I don't know what to do with Vimshatri Dasha. Most of you, I have to make a decision on it. I have 24 lessons on Vimshatri Dasha in my Dasha 1 and 2 class. I can't really kind of teach that in a week or two. So I may, give it for people who don't know anything about it. I may give you a couple core tapes. What I wanted to do in this class was teach you Charadasha, so I will give you the videotapes on Charadasha. I give them to you early enough so you can study them ahead, and then we can have 2 live classes using Charadasha for your personal charts and for country charts. So anyway, lots of deep knowledge. For those of you who study with me, I'm kind of into depth, and again, you can get out of it as much as you want, but everybody gets out of it whatever they put into it, so it's always great. Okay, so that's kind of my overview. It's kind of a complex mix because we have to make it relevant to your personal life and for helping you plan in the world, and at the same time, it's part of my financial astrology class and business track and mundane astrology predictions too, which is all kind of fascinating. So we're going to try to fit it all in somehow. Okay. So, and I'm telling you, this is really like 2 courses. So for $395, you're going to get a lot of bargain because you're going to get much of my old transit class, which is on sale for $197 if you just want to buy that, or you can, you're going to get that plus you can get all the new material. So it's really quite a deal. Okay. I'm trying to take questions, but okay, did you figure out how to put, now I'm going to mute you. If for those of you who know GoToWebinar, some of you do, you kind of find the orange microphone under audio settings and you click on it and it turns green and then you can speak. And I meant to send out instructions on how to do it, and I did it for the last webinar, and I forgot to do that today, but you can also type questions in the chat box. and I will see them. And we can also take questions later. Okay. You can always email me questions too. Okay. So, okay, I usually start with some Vedic chanting. The Vedic astrology tradition comes from the priests, so we have to honor that kind of tradition. I do some Vedic chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakratunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Kirame Deva Sarvakarishi Sarvada. Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Bhujamulam Guru Padam, Panchamulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai. Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditya Samaye Mangalai Buddhaya Cha Guru Shukra Nibischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, and my holy tradition, and all my great Jyotish teachers. And we have some people signed up already, and I know some people told me they're signing up, so I think we're going to have a nice class. Okay, let me go to the actual presentation today. Like I said, this is a real class, so it's kind of an introduction to transits. And again, here's my contact information, support at fortucast.com or sw4@gmail.com. Okay. This is a repeat of what I just told you. Okay, so what are the purpose of understanding a transit class? Okay, transits, first of all, transits are a great way to understand natal charts, as when we experience aspects and transits in signs and nakshatras, we can observe what it means for someone's natal chart. So this is something kind of I realized, I may not have, Rahu and Satabhishak Nakshatra, but Rahu is currently transiting through Satabhishak Nakshatra in Aquarius now. And that only happens every 18 years. And you do get people if you do natal charts that have Rahu and Satabhishak Nakshatra. And so by understanding kind of the influences that are going on with that transit now, it can give you insights into those people. So, it's kind of, even though you might not have a natal chart planet, you will feel it in transit. This week, through next week, we have Jupiter and Mercury in a Parivartana yoga between Gemini and Sagittarius. Now, this doesn't happen this doesn't happen that often, because you only have Jupiter and Gemini every 12 years, and then you've got Mercury and Sagittarius every winter. So, and it's actually a big event, and you can kind of have a sense how important it is based on all the things that are kind of happening. But when you watch it in transit, then when you see it in somebody's natal chart, you're going to be a little bit more on top of understanding it. So transits can help us understand natal charts better. But again, transits impact us also anyway. I've had all kinds of amazing things happen with this transit. So observing transits allows us to learn astrology and to separate the play of the planets from our emotions and minds so that we can be free. So one of the techniques that I teach, if you read my book, is the planet, our mind is a little, and our emotions are kind of run by kind of a puppeteer. Saturn comes and creates fear, Jupiter comes and creates expansion, Venus, and Mars come and they create, anger and lust and things like that. before we studied astrology, we just kind of were a victim of our emotions and the energies that were running through our mind. So when we study astrology and we study transits, we can cut the puppeteer strings and witness what's going on. So yesterday, we have a planetary war between Mars and Venus going on, and I'm ruled by Mars. And I had this incredible wave of anger come up, and I know I usually don't have that much anger, actually. And it was particularly intense, and I was raging at somebody mentally. And of course, I reflected back and say, oh God, we're in a planetary war. I better not act on this, even though I want to blast this person. It's probably better that I just wait for this influence to kind of move away a little bit. And then in a saner moment, I will kind of find a kind way to express what needs to be said. So normally we're kind of a victim of our thoughts and our emotions, and we react, and somebody pushes our buttons and we react. And Vedic astrology can help us, and transit study can help us kind of see what's pushing our buttons and then what it kind of is telling us. Transit forecast is like a good weather forecast. I tell people, you don't plan a picnic when there's a tornado watch, if you're, otherwise you're in trouble. And it's kind of actually funny. There was a time when we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have a lot of communications going on. I remember in the early 80s, and I went to a local park here, and there had been a tornado, and there's a tornado that had touched down there even. I didn't really even know about it, and I actually ended up going after, the tornado had touched down, or just kind of briefly kind of swooped in to scare people. And I was kind of oblivious, it's kind of interesting. But the point is, we all have better communications now, but we also need to kind of not plan important things in our year if there's a tornado watch out, for example. I mean, there are months this year that are pretty tumultuous. We'll talk about them next week. The first 2 or 3 months of the year with Mars in Capricorn and being afflicted, we're gonna have a lot of wars breaking out. Do you want to really, you have to be careful if you're planning foreign trips. There's a lot of other wild things happening this year. And the more that you understand them, the more you can kind of plan your life. And that's one of the values of astrology. Still, we don't want to use transits to become a Chicken Little. I mean, I have a friend who was an astrologer, and literally she was so afraid of the transits and the Dashas that were going on in her life that she was afraid to go out. And she would go out. She'd have her food delivered, and in fact, I saw her for the first time in about 6 years. And then I asked and I asked somebody, and she said, well, she's really been kind of not wanting to go out. We can't live our lives like that. We're not meant to live our lives in fear. We have to be empowered. And sometimes with transits, you can plan your year well. I mean, I tell people we get 11th house transits. Sometimes a lot of money comes in, a lot of gains, a lot of fulfillment of desire happens. And 11th house transits are always followed by 12th house transits. And what happens? Unexpected expenditures. The car breaks down. There's a flood in the basement. They tell people, save your money during the 11th house transits when you have extra money, because those 12th house transits are going to hit. And they always do. And I watch every year. I watch this, and I think, God, all this great money is coming in, and it's really great, and I'm going to spend it. And then lo and behold, the 12th house transits come, and you're in trouble. So it's good to kind of learn things like that. We get a lot of 6th house transits. We have to learn, those impact our health. We have to learn, 6th house teaches us that if we're disciplined with exercise and diet, then, we don't really have to worry about the 6th house transits. If we don't take care of our health and we don't exercise well and we don't meditate regularly, then the 6th house transits hit and we're kind of thrown for a loop. Eighth house transits. Eighth house is, eighth house transits are always the tricky ones if you're running an eighth house dasha at the same time, because, what do you get? Divorces, hospitalizations, court cases, all these kind of weird, wild things. Those don't always happen, but, it's just good to understand, your year and how to plan your transits. But the important thing is that transits are triggers for larger things that are going on in the dashas. So transits are only 20% of prediction. Dashas are 80%, which is why we have 24 lessons on dashas, and I have to teach dasha 3 sometime maybe this year. But transits are triggers, but it's kind of contextual. You can kind of see what's happening. I mean, we have, just look at the fall. We had President Trump's Navy circling South America and creating a blockade about Venezuela. And, if you followed my predictions, I said, well, probably the U.S. is going to go into war between January 2nd and January 9th because, well, we had all those transit triggers. Sun conjunct Mars, Mars conjunct Venus, Mars, totally combust. And this is all happening in the sign of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the sign of the zodiac connected to war because it's the only sign of the zodiac with a bow and arrow. It's got an archer, right? So, and the United States is a Sagittarius rising country. And we're always at war because we have the bow and arrow as our archetype. So suddenly you've got 4 planets in Sagittarius, and including all the fire planets, and to how easy a prediction is that to kind of like not see that, well, you've got this situation going on with Venezuela, something's going to happen. Or we also had Russia yesterday with capturing of the naval vessel, and we're not through, so but you can kind of see, the dasha kind of gives you a context, and even when you look at the world, you get a context of what's going on, and so it's not a surprise when you get the transit triggers that something's going to happen. I mean, Europe is broadcasting that they want to go to war with Russia, and they're doing it to deflect all their economic and failed policies, and it's a way of distracting people. And people create, politicians, nobody really wants war, but politicians do this because it's their only way out sometimes. And that can be said in the US too, of course. But but you can kind of can get a context of what's happening, and so you're not going to be surprised. And we can look at, next year I have to look at, I mean, there's a good chance that China will invade Taiwan, and we need to figure out when that's going to be. And once that happens, the US will respond, and we could easily be at war with China. And China's been kind of setting up a large game of Go, doing all kinds of crazy things to, because they're a long-term player, and they've been, and then one of the reasons, for all the reasons people talked about Maduro, what they didn't talk about was, and I can document this, was that Russia was going to put in hypersonic missiles into Venezuela or Cuba, and this was going to be another 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And so rather than let that happen, our intelligence was aware of this possibility, and they went in to stop it. So it wasn't just about the oil, it wasn't even about the drugs, but it's really kind of a global chess match that's going on. And China's been playing all kinds of global chess for a while, with trying to take over the Panama Canal, and we kicked them out of there. Both Russia and China have huge influences in Africa now. I mean, some of these big players have, they have big ambitions, and for a long time we just haven't been on top of it. And whether you like President Trump or not, being aware and on top of these things is important for our safety. But but inevitably these things kind of blow up, and you can see them in the transits and the dashas. Okay. We have to remember that, you know, I find that people tend to get too negative about transits. Oh my God, Mars is conjunct Saturn, and the sun's combusting Mars, and you know, and, oh, woe is me. You know, there are always positive lessons in these transits, and we have to kind of learn how to kind of understand them. I mean, Saturn is the bad high school coach that makes you work really hard so that you win the race. So even when he gives you health problems, he's saying, you didn't take care of yourself these last 10 years. You know, I think I've got to show you that when you don't take care of yourself, your body's not going to be very happy. And maybe if you get sick, you'll kind of finally wake up and say, God, I have to take better care of myself. So even the malefic planets are good. They're not, you know, Saturn's our best planet, really. And you know, Mars does a lot of great things too. So we have to understand that there are deep, wonderful lessons in the transits, and not, you know, think, oh my God, I'm victimized. Saturn got me, and I'm, you know, you know, we don't ever want to do that. You know, we have to understand sometimes that even bad transits are just minor speed bumps. You know, and what I teach people is that we look back about even the most difficult times of our lives. If we hadn't gone through that, if we hadn't had that messy divorce or been in the hospital or been in pain for that year or something, we wouldn't be the person we are today. So we always have to kind of look at our journey in a long-term format. It's very important. That's what I do with my long-term coaching work. Astrology can help us soothe our intellect and answer core questions of why we are suffering. And this is helpful for Mercury-dominated people. But, you know, I find a lot of Geminis, people with dominant Geminis, including myself. I have Jupiter in Gemini, you know, are kind of like, why is this happening to me? And astrology kind of tries to, you know, the air signs always want to know why is this happening to me? And it's important, and when we, you know, they can help them transcend and see the might of the world. But water signs sometimes are different. They just have to kind of feel and understand things. And earth signs need practical answers. And I often teach, you know, if you do consultations, you need to address people's needs, because, you know, there's a big difference between Aries and Taurus, right? Aries is like, they want straight talk, action steps. They're about action. They want to be praised for their talents and their abilities. You know, Taurus, it's all about material things and money, business. How can I make more money? You know, food. You have to help them get less lazy. Geminis are more intellectual. You have to kind of, you know, why is this happening? Everything is why. Cancers, you know, how you have to talk about their feelings. You know, this transit's going to help you, it's going to cause you to feel this way, and you have to realize that it's a temporary impact, and you're not your feelings. But, you know, for cancers, everything is feeling, you know, for everybody else for that matter. You know, so you can, if you know, you can go through this. This is my advice on how to give special consultations to different rising signs. Virgos, you know, for example, are practical. You know, they need, you know, and I had a friend who, you know, was an astrologer, and he was a Virgo rising. And I knew right away that it wasn't about even explaining anything that was going on in his chart. It was like, I need practical advice. I need to solve these problems, you know, particularly about health, because Virgo is the sixth sign of the zodiac, health. So of course, you know, so you really have to kind of think that way when you do consultations, but that's very specific. Again, I talked about transits are 20%, dashas are 80%. Okay. Now, another area, and certainly we learned this from the Western astrologers, is transits impact us most strongly when they hit key areas of our natal chart. For example, at the moment, Rahu's at 17 degrees Aquarius. If you have key planets, particularly maybe your ascendant or the sun or Saturn or something at 15 to 17 degrees Saturn, this is kind of a dicey time for you, particularly if you're in a Rahu period or a Rahu Saturn period or Saturn Rahu period. It's kind of monumental when that, when you have a direct hit to a natal planet. So we always have to look for those. But if the dasha is strong, if you're in a Jupiter dasha and you have that Rahu going over your natal Saturn or something like that, you'll be a little bit anxious, and you might need to go to the doctor a little bit for some high blood pressure or something. But it may not be the end of the world because you're in a Jupiter period. But if you're in a Rahu Saturn period or Saturn Rahu period and you have Rahu transiting over your natal Saturn, then it's like a direct hit. So what I teach is that when the dasha is running and the transit is hitting at the same time, it's a direct hit. And when you get a direct hit, then a major event happens. Most of the time, we don't have direct hits. I mean, maybe you've had 2 or 3 major events in your life that were earth-shattering, and maybe you go back and you look at the transits and you see they were kind of earth-shattering, but they're not always like that, and we tend to fear transits more than we really need to. Most of you know this basic stuff. Rahu and Ketu spends 18 months in a sign and 9 months in a nakshatra. So those are kind of large influence. What you might not know is that Rahu has a 30-degree aspect to the sign next to it. So it really has kind of a 5-year impact, even more than Saturn. So Rahu in Aquarius is still aspecting Pisces. So if you had trouble with Rahu and Pisces and you thought, oh my God, I can't wait till Rahu gets into Aquarius, you're wrong, because Rahu's aspecting Pisces still. So I learned that from Sanjay Roth. It's very important in natal charts. It's very important in transits. That's why we have these kind of 5-year Rahu transits. You really have to kind of stay on top of them. Saturn spends 2.5 years in a sign, and transits are most problematic in the last 10 degrees of the sign. So when you hit 20 degrees, that's when Saturn kind of kicks in its fury. And so people fear Saturn transits, but the first 10, 20 degrees is not a problem. So we don't, this year Saturn's not as a huge problem, because I think it may get up to 20 degrees and go retrograde, but it's definitely not going to go past 20 degrees this year. So that's something to be aware of. Jupiter spends 12 months in a sign. Currently, sometimes it retrogrades back between signs. Over the next number of years, we're going to have like these quicker transits, and then going into the next sign and then retrograding back. So Jupiter goes into Cancer July 1st, and then it goes into Leo October 31st, and then it spends just a couple months there like it did this year in Cancer, and it retrogrades back into Leo. It's going to be doing that for a number of years now, so it's kind of teasing us. It gives us a six sneak preview. Mercury, when it goes retrograde, it's been 60 to 63 days in a sign. So and so it's something to be aware of. And in fact, one of the sneaky things about Mercury is that every 7 years it retrogrades in groups of signs. So let's see, this is not true. This year we're retrograding in so you have all the retrogrades. I think we're in water signs this year, right? It's between water and air signs, but water signs this year. So Saturn retrograding in Scorpio, and so every you have these series of every 7 years you kind of rotate in various different groups of the signs. It's kind of interesting because it brings up different influences. Venus goes retrograde for 2 months every 2 years. I am going to give you guys a quick break. I have to just let's take a 3-minute break, and I'll be back. If you need a water break or a bathroom break or need to answer an email, here's your chance, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I am back. Let's see. Let's give you guys another minute or two. I'm hoping my Thursday classes, I've been making an hour and a half because there's actually Jyotish overload after about an hour and a half. So I probably will also stop today in a half hour. And I have this habit. My Saturday classes tend to go 2 hours, and I tend to have a lot of material. And the way it works is that there's a lot of material always in my classes, and you get the replay videos, and you always have to look at the replay videos and study the notes to take it all in. But that's just the nature of studying Vedic astrology. So anyway, we're talking about Venus goes retrograde every 2 months, every 2 years. That's I didn't look up the Venus retrograde this year, but I have to do that for next week. Okay. Developing global awareness. Okay. Let's skip this for now. Okay, another important reason to study transits, I've taught a class in Muhurta. You're trying to create an electional astrology chart for start a new company or for the birth of for a marriage or something. You have to know the transits really well. And Prashna, which I don't teach or use, is also very dependent on really understanding transits well. Okay. For those of you who are interested in taking the class, I tend to use Southern Indian style charts. I can put up these dual charts that have north and south on them. What I teach is that, well, first of all, you need to know both north and south. Inevitably, you buy a book from the north and they don't put the southern charts in it, and vice versa. So you have to be ambidextrous. I call it ambidextrous. You need to be able to read both charts. I did northern charts for 30 years. I switched after 30 years because I can see Gemini aspects and other things in them much more easily. And it's very funny, the diagonals in the northern charts were kind of used to kind of help shift the consciousness so that you could see things that you weren't seeing. And the East Indian charts are even more bizarre in that way. But I finally switched to Southern Indian because it's just a whole lot easier. So if you don't, once in a while I get students who can't or won't learn Southern charts, but if I do get students like that, I always make sure we have a double north and south chart up. For those of you who want to study books on transits, when you sign up for the class, I will send you the Vedic ephemeris for the next 50 years that I have. That particular edition I have is in Sanskrit, so you have to, not Sanskrit calligraphy, but Sanskrit names. So you have to know Mesha is Aries and MEH is the abbreviation for Mesha, and Mangala is Mars. And it's worth knowing that anyway, but I do, and I also have another Vedic ephemeris I can give you, which is a quick look, at the last 50 years and the next 50 years. So there's kind of I have some unusual, and these things are hard to get if you ever, I think it's nice to have books. I think sometimes it's hard to look up things. I like Bill Levicy's book, Beneath the Vedic Sky. If you had to own one Vedic astrology book in the world, it's out of print, but you can usually find used copies. Again, I always recommend my book. If you sign up for the class, I will give you my 2019-2020 transit guide, which has a lot of detailed articles on transits in it. And again, we can't, Vedic astrology is rather encyclopedic. A couple of Western astrology books I like, Robert Hand's Planets and Aspects and Planets and Transits. Sometimes, you get Uranus, Venus squares, or Mars, Pluto conjunctions and things like that. And it's really good to understand them, and they really are important. And I notice those kind of things come up, and so it's really important. Another book called The Combination of Stellar Influences. It's another Western good book, which is good. Okay. So one of the things that we learned from Bill Levicy's book, is that there are favorable situations and there are unfavorable situations. And favorable is usually a friend sign, exalted sign, own sign, aspected by Jupiter or something like that. Unfavorable is in an enemy sign, debilitation sign, the edge of a sign, Sandhi, combust, too close to the sun, hemmed in by malefics on two sides, connected to the 6th, 8th, or the 12th houses, all kinds of things that will create darker planetary configurations. So we like to see planets in Kendras and trines, and even the 2nd and the 11th houses. We don't like to see planets in the 6th and the 8th and the 12th houses. But what we learn in Vedic astrology is that it's 1,000 shades of gray. So you've got Mars in the 9th house, but it's debilitated and it's got a Jupiter aspect. What do you do with that? Well, it's generally good, but the person might be tired all the time. Cancer rising, something like that. So you eventually, what happens in Vedic astrology is that you have to learn to discriminate these 1,000 shades of gray and translate it into English for your clients. And it's part of what I teach. It's really kind of understanding this deeply. I also teach you that one of the most important things you can do, there's too many transits, so you can't really look at everything. What should we really look at? Well, we should always look at the transits of the ascendant lord. So if you're Aries rising or Scorpio rising, look at Mars and look at Ketu as a secondary ruler of Scorpio. If you're Aquarius rising, look at Saturn and Rahu may be the primary ruler. But we always have to kind of study the transits of the ascendant lord are the most important thing, how it interacts, what houses it goes into, how it interacts with other planets. And and then we can also look at the Dasha lord. The transits of the Dasha lord are really important. We have to see how planets interact with other transiting planets. Are they malefics or benefics? Now, yeah, I mean, that Mars-Venus planetary war, I definitely felt it yesterday. I haven't been too disturbed by the Mars combustion other than being tired, but I definitely felt the planetary war. And Venus for Scorpio is a 12th house ruler, so it kind of tends to trigger things. You always have to look to see if transits interact with your natal benefic planets or your natal malefic planets. So I have Jupiter at 26 degrees Gemini. So whenever I get Mercury or Venus or other planets going over my natal Jupiter, there's a positive influence. So those are things that you're aware of. Some of you may have studied Ashtaka Varga. I have videotapes on this. I'm not going to teach that in this class, but there are these things called energy. They're called Bindu points, but they're energy points. So sometimes, if you have a lot of energy points connected to a transit, it may elevate it, and if you have too few energy points due to a transit, then it may bring it down, and that's a whole science. Okay. Talked about malefics kicking us in the butt. We also have to understand our natural and functional malefics. These are kind of things that most of you know from basic astrology. Saturn is a good planet for Libras and Tauruses, brings material success. Mars is a good planet for Cancer and Leos. Mars is the worst planet for Virgo. Saturn is the worst planet for Cancer and Leo. So you have to be aware of that, because Saturn transits are really difficult for Leos and Cancers, but they're not as difficult for Libras and Taurus. My wife went through Sadi Sat, and it was through her 9th, 10th, and 11th houses. How lucky was that? And she really did not have a difficult Sadi Sat period at all. And she's a Libra rising, and so Saturn, really brought about a lot of spiritual growth for her and success in career. So you just have to take things like that into account too. Okay, so you all know this basic thing. Basically we have to know our darks, and we have to know the good and dark side of every planet. And if you take the class, I'll send you the PowerPoint. You can study this. It's in every basic Vedic astrology book. Venus, when unafflicted, we like it in Pisces, we like it in Taurus, we like it in Libra, we like it connected to Mercury, things like that. Love of things and people, pleasure, comforts, clothing, vehicles, sexual pleasures, relationships, love of the arts, music, dance, all those things. But when it's afflicted, laziness, lack of diplomacy, jealousy, overindulgence, vanity, there's every planet has a light and dark side, so you can study those. I don't need to go over them. But we need to learn them. But the key is that we eventually have to kind of master these 1,000 shades of gray in the transit. So then we have to remember, like, retrograde malefics are more powerful to cause trouble. Retrograde benefics actually cause more good. I mean, how many do you all know that? People scream about Mercury retrograde all the time, but if you're Virgo or Gemini rising, it's positive. It may make you more inward, but it may strengthen your body. And like, Saturn retrograde is more difficult for Cancers. It's a 12 and Leos, and so you've got to remember there's all these 1,000 shades of gray. We also have to kind of look at dispositors and nakshatra rulers. Again, I have a 15-lesson course on nakshatras. I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach very much of that. But all those classes are available. But we do have to understand dispositors, and this, I call it landlords and tenants. So the dispositor can be the dispositor, the owner of the nakshatra, the dispositor of the sign. So let's say you have an exalted sun in Aries, and people look at your chart and say, "Oh my God, you're such a great leader, and you have this kingly presence, and you're just, I just love being around you. You radiate such positive energy and confidence." And then you look and you see the dispositor of Aries, Mars, it's in Cancer, and it's with Saturn and the Sun. And suddenly you realize, and the person says, "Well, I really don't have those experiences, So dispositors are really important, and that also is in transit too. So very important in natal and in transit to study the dispositors. And I think we've had this huge complex transit. Let's look at that now. So I usually run a chart for Chicago because the trading markets are there. But okay, so this is today. This is right now, 3:08 p.m. in Chicago, and this is a chart of what's happening now. We're Gemini rising. We've got Jupiter in Gemini at 26 degrees. So one of the interesting things is that people were really thinking it's the end of the world with all these combust planets and Sagittarius. And, what they forgot to think about is Jupiter is aspecting them all. And it's in its own nakshatra, Purnavasu, which is kind of a Earth Mother energy, very kind of abundant and giving. And so there is kind of a benevolent energy here. And the Parivartana Yoga here is, depending on what your rising sign is, is actually bringing Jupiter into Sagittarius, and Mercury goes into Gemini, and Jupiter in Sagittarius is in its own sign. So it's really kind of gracing all these other planets. So even though, and you think about the United States, which is a Sag rising chart. So of course, the US will be very victorious in that Venezuelan thing because Jupiter's in its own sign, and it's got the 9th Lord Sun transiting there, and Mercury gets vanished into the house of enemies, but the 7th house. But you can see that the dispositors are very important. How far is the dispositor away? So Venus is and this is not a particularly good case because of the Parivartana Yoga, but it does kind of remind us that there are a lot of hidden things going on sometimes. They're not nearly as simple as possible. Today the moon is opposed by Saturn. It's something to note on a very kind of subtle level. Can create a subtle level of fear or anxiety. It's something we're not real happy with. It's a tight aspect. When we get an aspect within 3 degrees, it's pretty significant. Stock market has been failing to go up today, and I think this aspect is not helping very much. But you know, if we go ahead a week, go ahead 2 weeks, we have everything shifting into Capricorn. Capricorn is not quite as friendly as Sagittarius, you know, with the Jupiter aspect. So you can kind of see that you've got Mercury conjunct Mars in 2 weeks. It's, I think, on the 19th. That's always a messy aspect. We still have the combustions going on with Venus and Mars, but it's in Capricorn, and the dispositor Saturn is, well, 3 houses away. I mean, I'd rather have Saturn in Pisces than a lot of other places. I mean, you know, if Saturn in Aries for sure would be a total mess, but you know, it's still Saturn, and all those planets being in Capricorn and Saturn being, you know, being 3 houses away, it's not really great. Don't forget Rahu is aspecting Saturn during this whole transit, because Rahu is a 30-degree aspect to Saturn, and that creates kind of a little bit more anxiety and workaholism, and just, you know, that influence is just there until November. And I don't, Neptune is at 5 degrees. Outer planets are important. Again, that conjunction is February 20th. The influence is there all year. But you can see how we have these geopolitical changes happening. Okay. Anyway, if you go up a couple months, I'm doing weeks, so August, September, October. So this is kind of interesting looking ahead. We've got Mars, we're going to have Mars and K2 conjunct for a bunch. And Jupiter's also there with it, and that's going to be in Leo. And I'll have to talk about that next week. We don't usually, that's kind of an unusual conjunction that we don't see very often. And it's happening, well, Leo's going to be in Scorpio, so Sun's in Scorpio, so there's a part of our yoga between Mars and the Sun here. So, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I'm worried about with K2. K2 actually causes more problems than Rahu, to tell you the truth. But we'll have to talk about that next week. Okay. Okay. So other thing, there are a lot of things that we're going to learn in the class. I have some sneak previews here, but we have a lesson on full moons and new moons and what they mean. A lesson on eclipses. A lot of Western astrologers spend a lot of time doing prediction based on eclipses. I have certainly studied them over the years, and I will give you the Vedic rules around eclipses. It's kind of, in some ways, I don't worry as much about eclipses because we get 4 to 6 a year, and the rule with eclipses is there. If you're not in a Rahu Sun, Rahu Moon, K2 Sun period, and the eclipse isn't hitting a key point in your chart, like your ascendant or your natal sun, your natal moon, or something like that, eclipses are like an emotional bump usually. But you know, once or twice in a lifetime, you're in the wrong period, and the eclipse hits a key point, and then you know it happens to me once. It impacts your life for 6 months, and maybe things just are challenging for 6 months. It happened to me once in 1999. Study the Panchanga, you know, the ruler of the day, the nakshatra of the day, the lunar day, the tithi. We had a whole course on this. The nakshatra yogas, I'm realizing, are just about everything. I don't know, most people, I've just learned these later. I mean, I knew about them. I've just learned them in detail late in life. And there are these combinations of lunar days and days of the week and nakshatras that create special relationships. So like today, this is Sunday the 22nd, but this is November 22nd. So these are in the software. This is a Nasa yoga that happens because of it's a Sunday with the moon and you know during nakshatra number 1 in Ashvini, and I forgot. Anyway, there are all these complicated rules, but the software does it now all. But it creates a Nasa yoga, which I think is kind of creates annihilation. So I find these when you're doing Muhurtas, or when you're really kind of judging what kind of a day it is, these nakshatra yogas are really crucial. And we get maybe 6 or 7 really bad ones a month, and it's good to know when they are. We can teach that to you in that lesson on Panchanga. Days of the week are important. There are hours of the day that there's a thing called Rahu Kalam, or Kukalam, I never know how to pronounce it, which is a time of at certain times of the day that Rahu is dominating. And if something really difficult is going to happen, it'll probably happen during the Rahu Kalam period. So on a Monday, if we have a 6 o'clock sunrise, Rahu Kalam is like 9, is like 7:30 to 9. And there are all these, I learned this from a medical astrology book, and it's kind of fascinating. This is the, anyway, you can look up these in the software too, but these are kind of fascinating. Okay. Well, okay, as you know, Vedic astrology is kind of endless, and my voice is also limited. But I wanted to kind of just give you an overview of some of the exciting things that you're going to learn. Again, this class will probably run until around the end of May at the, considering how many lessons we have. And then we only have it every 3 weeks, 3 times a month, because once a month we practice. You get the practicum, where you look at mundane astrology and financial markets, and you look at all the transits. So it's a kind of, I incorporated that into the last course, and I will continue doing that because it's how we learn all this stuff. Okay. So I'm going to try to take questions. I'm not going to try. I'm just hoping that you can figure out how to get you. Okay, I'm unmuting you all again. And you can put questions in the chat box. Or you can also put them under question. Put them in the chat box. And if you know how to mute your mic, you can. Usually it's going under audio settings and hitting, let's see, Tindy is all self-muted, and it's, okay, I've unmuted you, but it's not. Okay, so I unmuted you, though it didn't unmute you, so I don't know. Okay, so I've had this problem sometimes. For those of you who are panelists, and I only have Elizabeth is here. Elizabeth, can you get on the mic?
Yeah, I can get on the mic.
Okay. Again, for some reason I can't get anybody. Could you just share my experience with your experience with my courses?
Yeah. So I found Barry, I don't know, what's it been, like 5 years now? Something, maybe 6 years. He goes so in depth. He gives information. He's there to answer questions. We look at our charts, we look at other charts, and it's a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, there's always more to learn, but Barry just puts a lot of time and love into it and makes sure that it all makes sense as we're going through it as well.
Good, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay. Let's see. Anybody? Any other questions? I do apologize. I am unmuting you, and I don't have this problem in class. It's just because you become panelists, and like Elizabeth, you just can easily unmute the mic. I don't, there must be some master setting that is new that is just not working today. I don't know why. Yeah, it's saying that you can't unmute yourself. So I do apologize. I don't, once in a while this happens, but you can put a question into chat. This is so weird. Okay. No. Well, in any case, next week is the practicum, which is the year ahead, and it'll be a special 2-hour edition because it's going to be 2 hours to get through everything. Lately, I've been trying to do an hour and a half, but next week we'll have to do 2 hours. The year ahead, again, that's $39 if you don't take the course. It's free if you take the course. If you're planning on taking the course, then, like I said, you'll get the next 4 monthly video magazines for free, and it's a bonus. So early bird is $395. Most of you have credit cards and you can take payments that way. If you don't have credit cards and you need a payment plan, I can set up, you can email me and I can set up PayPal to allow you to make, monthly payments. And, when I've studied Vedic astrology, people have charged me $1,800 and $1,500 and $1,000. So my courses, it's not the total source of my income, so I try to make it reasonable. And my classes run about $25 a class, so sometimes $20 a class. So they're quite reasonable, and so I hope you'll join me in upcoming classes. Again, if you have any questions, we have a couple different email addresses, but I think Barry too at Applied Vedic Astrology has been working, but also, if not, you can also use support at fortunecast.com, which is my business address. And my website, appliedvedicastrology.com. Okay, so again, if by some chance you had a question, you can email it to me. And again, I don't know what's going on with GoToWebinar today. So again, the early bird discount for the class, I think, runs through next week. And I look forward to seeing you in my classes. And you will get a copy of this video. You get a link within a couple hours. And again, I'll send it in 24 hours and for a replay, and you can share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear from you. And if you are not taking the class, please stay in touch with my blog at appliedvedicastrology.com. Sign up for my free newsletter. Most of you probably get that. Watch my YouTube videos and all of that wonderful stuff. Luckily, I'm blessed with, I don't make a full-time living from Applied Vedic Astrology. It's just my passion. And so I teach it with a passion, but I don't have to kind of charge ridiculous prices for things. So that's good. Okay, final Jeopardy answer. Elizabeth, any final comments?
You definitely share a ton of information for like an insane value. So
yeah, it's true.
It's like insane, like truly insane. Anybody listening, it's insane. It's amazing. Very
yeah, Jupiter and Purnavasu, it's like the Earth Mother. It's just giving away all its knowledge. I just, it's like, I'm telling you, you just can't find any of this stuff. I mean, I've had teachers that, you study with them 4 years and maybe they share one nugget. It's like they're just, some people are not very friendly about sharing knowledge. I have Jupiter and Purnavasu. I just can't. I'm a spigot. It just flows out.
Well, it's amazing. You're a blessing, Barry. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's good. Okay, so I'll look forward to seeing you in the future and stay in touch. And those of you who are getting the copy of this video, definitely, let me know what you're thinking. And we'll see you next week on the video magazine for those of you who are going to be participating, and have a great week.